And welcome to Weather and Ag in Focus on this Monday, the last Monday in March, as April is right around the corner, and Mother Nature, she's not going to pull any April Fool's jokes on us. It's the real thing, as we've got a pretty potent storm system that's has its crosshairs on the northern plains for later this week. I'm Chief Meteorologist Dean Wysocki, and along with our Ag Director, Bridgette Readel. Bridgette, did you have a good weekend? The weather was absolutely beautiful across much of the area this weekend.
I think most everybody is just looking ahead to the coming week and realizing that it's going to change and they best be prepared for it.
Yeah, in fact, I know a lot of people have travel plans with the Easter holiday coming up here, and we do have changes and some pretty big changes as well. Now, currently, not too bad out there, but there's a big variety of weather across the area. From the 20s in the Northern Valley and some light snow right along the U.S.-Canadian border into far northern Minnesota, stretching over towards International Falls. So if you're going north, you might run into some slippery travel once you get towards the Canadian border there. But other than that, that's a cold front that is moving southward, and it will press through the area tonight. As it does, we will see a few rain and snow showers across the area tonight. But before that, we should reach highs in the 50s today, but again, only 20s and 30s in the Northern Valley. And as we see that rain and snow overnight tonight, it doesn't look like a big deal right now at this standpoint, so I'm not worried about any accumulating snow. The far Northern Valley could pick up a dusting, but other than that, should not be a big deal. And then as we head into tomorrow, it's going to be blustery and a little colder with highs only in the upper 30s to near 40. We'll stay there on Wednesday, and then we've kind of got a two-part storm system coming our way for later in the weekend of the upcoming weekend. Part one comes in on Thursday into Friday. That looks to be the one that's going to affect the valley the most in terms of snowfall amounts. And this is going to be that heavy, wet snow, not the light, fluffy stuff. This is going to be the heart attack snow when you try and shovel it. Now, our latest computer guidance is all over the place. What we look for is consistency in our models, and our American model is all over the place, but two of the models that have been very consistent over the last couple of days has been the European model and our Canadian model. And if you want to know how much snow those models are predicting, head on to our webpage at WDAYradionow.com. I've also got some examples on our Facebook page for Weather and Ag and Focus as well. So we're looking at about a general 6 to 10, the way it looks now, across much of the valley, with slightly higher amounts to the west and south. That's part one of the storm, Thursday into Friday. Part two comes Friday into Saturday, and it looks like that main storm will pass to our south, affecting areas of South Dakota and southern Minnesota. So everybody's going to get a taste of winter out of this. If you have travel plans, I would leave early Thursday morning if you have anywhere to go in the northern plains, because after that, things go downhill quickly. So I know it's a big holiday weekend. It's Easter weekend, but unfortunately, Mother Nature is not going to cooperate with some nice weather like we just had this last weekend. Next weekend's going to be a little bit different. We'll probably be shoveling out. That's the way it looks right now. And again, things can change. But over the next 24 to 48 hours, once this storm gets inland, that's when we'll have a little better handle on exactly how much snow we're going to get. We're going to get snow. The question is exactly how much. So right now, it looks like in the FM area, probably 6+ inches of snow the way it looks right now. A couple of our models are giving us quite a bit less, but then a couple are giving us quite a bit more. So we'll kind of go the middle ground right now and go right around that 6-inch mark. But again, we'll fine-tune the forecast over the next 24 to 48 hours. And this weather forecast has been brought to you by Progressive Ag Risk Management. So, Bridgette, overall, again, if you have any travel plans, please keep up to date on the forecast, as things are going to go downhill starting on Thursday.
Well, and I think it's going to matter tremendously which parts of the U.S. that folks are going to be traveling in right now. You know, the Dakotas, Minnesota certainly is a general concern, but we have listeners from both coasts and straight down the traditional Midwest who are probably wondering some of the same things right now as they are considering putting a crop in the ground and so much more.
Yeah, no doubt. And like I said, you can head on to our webpage, WDAYradionow.com, and I've got a map on there showing across much of the Midwest how much snowfall that we are expecting, and areas down to our south. Speaking, down in the drought regions of South Dakota and Nebraska, even those areas, although they're not going to get snow, they are going to get some much-needed rainfall down in those drought-stricken areas. So that's a little bit of good news for areas down to our south because they really, really need the moisture down there.
Many of those folks are started to see their wildfires finally taking some control. I think the last look, they were probably at about 96% contained in a number of areas. Also, I had some messages just before the show started that the Nebraska Truckers Association is working in conjunction with Nebraska Cattlemen to move around supplies, hay, fencing, feed, and so much more for those ranchers who have been affected. So if you're curious what those details might look like, you can drop me an email, ag@flagfamily.com, or if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I was reposting that information right there. For all of those email suggestions that you want to send or questions you might have, again, I'm ag@flagfamily.com. Dina's weather@flagfamily.com. Superior Grain Equipment makes sure to power our inboxes because they protect your farm's future with superior grain storage, drying, and handling solutions. You can learn more at superiorbins.com. That phone number is the JLA Insurance phone line, 701-293-9000. Love to hear from you. Depending on what you're doing today, maybe you want to share weather, comments, and questions for upcoming guests and so much more. And you are welcome to. You can reach us at 701-293-9000. And many of you take advantage of being able to watch on our Lighthouse Commodities live stream. That live stream is brought to us by, as I said, Lighthouse Commodities and is shown on YouTube, Facebook, and Acres TV. Additionally, I know Addison and I are working on a little project in the background from Commodity Classic. It was an interview I did with the Valent companies in regards to a new active ingredient that they are bringing into the market for corn, soybeans, and wheat. Will probably be more of a burn down fit than many others. And once we have that video uploaded to Acres TV, it might take us a day or so. We'll let you know that that's been taken care of, so you can find it on our Weather and Ag and Focus channel. So lots going on there.
Yeah, and we've got Trucker Al on line one with a question. Trucker Al, what's going on, buddy?
I just left Mason City. It's close to 80 degrees down here now.
Don't rub it in.
They're calling for a little more than an inch still coming up next couple of days.
Yeah, northern Iowa won't see a whole lot out of this. Most of it, again, is going to be in the Dakotas and central and northern parts of Minnesota. But I am a little worried about the second part of the storm, Friday into Saturday. That may affect areas of southern Minnesota for areas people going down towards the cities or coming back from the cities. But area-wide, everybody's going to get something out of this, and it will impact travel starting on Thursday going through, it looks like, Saturday.
What about Wisconsin? They going to get anything?
Wisconsin, same way, yeah. And again, we've got a map up on our website, Al, of how much snow is expected across the upper Midwest, and I'd say mainly northern Wisconsin is going to get the heavier amounts out of this as well.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you, sir.
Safe travels, Al.
See you Saturday.
You got it. All righty. So there we go. Al's rubbing it in that it's 80 degrees down in Mason City. Thanks, Al.
Al is out and about and during National Grain Bin Safety Week. And for those of you who didn't realize you could be celebrating such a thing, oh my, yes, you can. We want to make sure that folks are well aware that grain bins are going to be of a higher focus this time of year. Folks are moving out new crop, they're cleaning bins, preparing for what will happen in 2026. And if you have employees, if you have family members that you're working with that aren't familiar with some of the safety functionality around bins, bin sites, and so much more, actually, you can be a part of presentations every day this week on safety around the bins. Those are virtual webinars. They're held every day at 10 a.m. They're about an hour long, and they are hosted by University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and also the University of Illinois Feed Technology Center. So if you have an interest in watching those, sharing them with employees, maybe that's the right time to take a break and everybody gets a little safety meeting, you can go ahead and drop me that email again, ag@flagfamily.com. and I will share the links for you so that you can be a part of it. Surprisingly, the most common agents of fatalities and injuries on farms certainly can be grain bins during this grain bin safety week, but more incidents happen with four-wheelers. We have so many that we use, whether it's moving cattle, whether it is checking fields, whether it's just getting from place to place on the operation. So actually, injuries, about 40% of farm injuries happen on four-wheelers, and about 21% of fatalities happen on them as well. So keep safe this week. Remember to look for your lockout equipment, lockout tagout when you're going in and out of bins, and never go into a bin alone without an observer, especially if you have machinery running in that area. When we return, we'll be joined by our guest today, and that will be Dr. Emily Fox. Emily is one of the veterinarians at the Ashley Veterinary Clinic in Ashley, North Dakota. We'll visit with her and answer some of the questions we've been getting from you as listeners over the last few weeks. After the show today, I'm heading out to Northern Cass High School. I have the opportunity to visit with students because they often come on air with us to share what they've been doing, projects that they're working on, their connection to agriculture, and so much more. And so I'm going to work with another group of students out there like we did earlier last fall. and see if we can bring them in to be part of the show for a day, almost as assistant ag directors, you might say. And when we do have those assistant ag directors, they are sponsored by Cass County Farm Bureau. Thank you to them. They do a fantastic job of holding up their pillars on education as well as agricultural advocacy. And they do that by bringing some of our interns to us throughout the year. We are joined today by Dr. Emily Fox. And Dr. Fox, I have to say this, it's calving season, and as a large animal vet, it's probably been a long few weeks.
Yeah, it's been pretty busy here.
So I was at an event on Saturday and sat across the table from a lady who said, they're in the thick of things for calving. They'd had 7 calves overnight, had to pull 3. 2 of them were prolapses they had to sew back in. Have you been seeing a lot of prolapses? Have things been fairly calm? Have you had many calves that folks are pulling, or has it been a pretty smooth sailing season?
It seems like it kind of depends on who you are. I have a few people who are having a really good season so far, and I have a few people who are wondering what on earth they did for their karma to be this bad because they're definitely having a tough
Oh,
time. So it really depends on which one of my clients you're asking about. I feel like, across the board, people always ask me what kind of year is it? And I'm like, well, I mean, every year is, there's no real rhyme or reason to it, but I will say that some clients seem to be having a really great year. Like every year, somebody's having their best year and somebody's probably having their worst year. I had a client who bought quite a few bred animals and they're supposed to be bred the way that they were bred a previous year, when he bought them previously, but unfortunately they don't seem to be having the same type of calves. They've had very, very
mm,
large calves and they're bred heifers, so it's been really tough for him. I know he's got a pretty decent sized vet bill and he's seen a lot of us lately, and that's unfortunate. And then I have other guys who said, yeah, I'm loving this great weather, everything's going pretty good. Um, we certainly haven't seen a ton of pre-calving vaginal prolapses, I think because it hasn't been so cold. The pre-calving prolapses that are non-emergent as opposed to your uterine prolapses, which would be your post-calving prolapses that are much more emergent.
sure. Hmm.
Vaginal, that's a good conversation that we try to have with clients because it's very confusing for people. But vaginal prolapses are generally considered urgent but non-emergent. That's when pre-calving, the cow kind of pushes out a little bit of her vagina. It is important to replace these. If you don't, they can kind of scarify and sometimes they don't calve well through them. So it's important to replace them until they're ready to calve. However, if one is out, as long as the temperature is not crazy, if it's out for a day or whatever, it's not a huge deal. Whereas a uterine prolapse, the all of the vessels are exposed. Those are the ones they generally have post calving, and that's a much more serious thing. We need to do something, or this cow will pass away. So.
And Emily, with our snow event coming in later this week, and again, many areas will possibly see up to 10 inches, if not, of that heavy, wet snow. How, even if it's only for a day and a half, 2 days, how does that affect calving season at this point?
Well, it can make it hard to get to emergencies for one thing, but also, it definitely affects whether or not you have calves born that are chilled. A lot of the time, they can withstand a lot of cold once they're dry, but a wet calf in the cold is not great. So first of all, the fact that it's going to be a wet snow is disappointing because a dry snow is a lot better for the
Right.
animals. And then secondly, if they come out and they're wet and then they get froze, that's certainly not a good thing. So it's important to be cognizant of getting them dried off. The other thing that worries me a little bit is right now we're calving into a lot of mud. I think we're going to continue to see more problems with that. I'm not saying I'm not grateful for moisture, especially down in the area that I'm in, but I think we do have to remember that mud tends to breed pathogens, especially mud. When cows are laying in mud and they get mud all over their udders, that wicks pathogens right into the baby's gastrointestinal system when they go to nurse. And so that's a huge problem as well. And it also increases the risk of mastitis in those cows. And I certainly would say, at certain places at least, I've seen a little more mastitis this year than I have in previous years.
One of the other things that I think when it comes to calving, so many folks say, wow, it's fantastic to see so many sets of twins or triplets, etc. Is it fairly common, though, that second calf, that twin, is generally a bit weaker and the survivability rate is maybe not so good with twins as if you just have a single very healthy calf?
It's not always the second one out. Sometimes it's the first one out. Generally, of twins, there is a better twin and a worse twin. I actually was really surprised. I pulled a set of twins the other day and they were both kind of perfect. And I thought that was really odd because I'm used to seeing one that seems to be the worse of the two. um, or sometimes both of them are just kind of not as good as they would be otherwise. It's still, it's still really hard to raise both twins on the cow. I've even tried to do it personally just because I feel bad for the one that doesn't get any time with mom, but it's really, really hard on everybody to raise twins. I know I'm expecting a set of twins this year, and I'm probably just going to make one of them a bottle calf right away if everything goes well. But no, generally there is one that's kind of the stronger and one that's the weaker. Sometimes not so, and then two with twins, sometimes they go a little bit early, so both twins are weak because it is a little bit kind of like in humans. You see a lot of people who are
Hmm.
going to have twins who maybe they go into labor earlier or they decide to take the babies earlier. That's a similar situation to what happens in cattle.
Well, I think one of the things I heard you talking about was mud, not great, and for calves, for moms, and probably the biggest thing is scours. Or are there other diseases that when you have the mud this time of year during calving that will be prevalent?
Sure. So the mud definitely scours would be your first concern. Particularly, you could have your like your E. coli's, your things that just kind of live in the mud. In addition to that, you can certainly see more mastitis in the cows, which in turn can make the calves kind of sick. So they're, if the mother has rotten milk and they're nursing on that, that's not good for anybody. Um, and then, if we get more towards the summer and we still have this muddy mess, sometimes I see more foot rot, or even sometimes we start to see foot rot in baby calves, which is not something we usually see in this part of the country, but I certainly have seen in really muddy lots. And it makes it hard for animals to get around too. I find that when the lots are really muddy, I see a lot of cattle that kind of can't get out of the way. They hurt their legs. I think I see some calves that get stepped on because the cows are trying to stay in the one dry area and they step on the calves. So certainly all of those things can be perpetuated by mud. And then it also just makes things more difficult. If you have a cow that you really need to get up and treat, it makes it more difficult to get her up and treat her. It makes it more difficult even for the vet. For me, the other day I almost got stuck trying to go to somebody's place to pull a backwards calf because I pulled into the yard
Oh,
and I was right in the mud. So certainly it just makes things more difficult. People can't get their trailer in. It's harder to get cattle moved out or to have as many pens to put them in because they're all so muddy. And so it just creates this kind of logistical nightmare for producers as well. And I think we definitely shouldn't underestimate the problems that it can cause.
oh, I think they're pretty high, and that mud, literally a quagmire at this time of year in many respects. Uh, when we returned from our bottom of the hour news, I had some questions in regards to hardware disease in cattle, and we're going to pose those with Dr. Emily. This is Dr. Emily Fox from the Ashley Veterinarian Clinic, and we will talk with her right after this. We're talking about livestock health today, but don't forget about your cyber health, and that would be for your agribusiness, your farm, your home, and so much more. If you are considering the fact that maybe you don't have things as secure as they should be, potential hackers could be getting in, time to do the fence check assessment over at techsupport.farm. Chris Sherman will be happy to help you out. Make sure that you have things buttoned up properly when it comes to passwords and other security features. So make sure to talk to Chris. He'll be glad to give you a call and help out after that fence check assessment at techsupport.farm. Our guest is Dr. Emily Fox of the Ashley Veterinary Clinic. And Dr. Emily, after we had talked last time, I had folks reach out about hardware disease. And first and foremost, we should explain to folks what that would be. And then I have a follow-up question for you about how and when you treat it, so to speak.
Sure. So a hardware disease is what they traumatic reticuloperitonitis, I believe would be the technical term. But what most people call it is hardware because most cows get it from having hardware in their stomach. So we have to remember, first of all, the anatomy of the cow before we go any further. And I don't have a good cow model here, I apologize. But a cow has four stomach chambers. Only one of them is a true glandular stomach, like we imagine a stomach to be, where it secretes acid. That's the fourth chamber. But there are three chambers before that, one for fermentation, one for kind of drying and concentrating, and then one that's kind of a drain trap, which is the reticulum. And that's generally the area that people are talking about when we talk about hardware disease, although you can see hardware causing problems in other parts of the cow. I mean, technically, it could poke out their mouth when they eat it, and technically, I guess you could almost consider that a form of hardware disease, right? They can have other problems from eating a piece of wire, for example. And we see these things around cow yards commonly. Cows will kind of pick something up while they're eating, and they'll just accidentally ingest it. Sometimes it can be in the mixer wagon. If a piece breaks loose, there can be a piece of metal. But it's not with the way that cows eat, especially because they don't use their lips so much like horses, but they kind of use their tongue and scoop. It's not uncommon for them to swallow a small piece of metal. And what happens
Mhm.
is that piece of metal tends to end up in the drain trap part of their stomach. The drain trap part of their stomach is a very valuable asset. It was designed very well in a lot of ways, but unfortunately, it's also right across the diaphragm from their heart and their pericardium. And so, if it pokes forward, it can actually poke into the heart and into the sac that surrounds the heart, the pericardium, and it can cause inflammation there and actually lead to heart failure and death. And that's generally what people are talking about when they talk about hardware. There also are times where it pokes backwards instead and it ends up poking into the liver or into the stomach. Those are a little bit different, but generally traditional hardware is thought of as traumatic reticuloperitonitis, which is something poking forward from the reticulum. The other part to consider is that generally this inflammation causes swelling in the heart, so you'll end up with cardiac failure signs. So you'll see that people say, like a bottle jaw. I don't really know why they call it bottle jaw, but essentially just edema under the jaw, big, thick swelling under the jaw. It can move down the neck and into the brisket. It looks like their whole neck is kind of full of water and they don't look right. That's because their heart is backflowing essentially and they're not getting normal flow. You can also sometimes see a jugular pulse where you see an irregular pulse through their jugular vein in their neck. So unfortunately, it's an important thing to keep your yard cleaned up, but we try constantly and, we didn't originally own our place and we're constantly digging things out of the ground. So that's kind of how it starts.
So cattle are non-discriminate eaters. They just tend to go for it, and whatever happens, happens in their world. So when you do have that hardware that they ingest, small pieces of metal, whatever the case might be, do you then put the magnet, like the bolus, into their stomach at that point? Or do you just do it when they're a certain age as a preventative care method? And that was the question that came from a listener.
So this is somewhat risk-based. You can definitely treat a cow with a magnet when she has hardware. A lot of the time, a cow with hardware, there's not a lot you can do, but I've successfully treated a few. You try putting a magnet in, you hope that the magnet will essentially suck the wire back in, and then it will
Uh-huh.
sit in a more comfortable position in the reticulum. But that wouldn't be preferable. If you think you have a lot of junk around, or if you're just very, very careful like we are, it is better to put a magnet in. The other thing is, as a public service announcement, I hate putting magnets in adult animals, especially it's fine in our chute because we have a really nice neck extender on our chute and the whole thing's hydraulic. It's not so bad. But
Uh-huh.
nobody wants to put a magnet in your 4-year-old bull. I really don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. You're going to get tossed around. It is so easy to put one of these in like a heifer calf before she's 1,000 pounds. It's a lot easier. Generally, I don't do them in little calves because this is a big thing to swallow. But like when you decide to keep replacements, like at my house, once we know that we're keeping a calf as a replacement before it's a yearling, it'll get a magnet. And generally, that's what I recommend for the average person who thinks that they might need magnets on their place.
Do you then remove the magnet at a certain age, or does that magnet ride with that animal for its lifetime? And additionally, do you also do it with sheep as a ruminant animal?
I think some people magnet sheep. I am not sure, to be honest with you. That is very far outside my wheelhouse. Sheep are very far outside my wheelhouse. There probably are people that do it, but I wouldn't think sheep are as likely to eat um, metal as well. And somebody who knows more about sheep should probably speak on this. I just think the way they graze might be a little bit different. I don't know. They might be more like horses, where it's a little easier for them to select. That's the real problem for cows, is that they kind of, the way that they scoop, it's very hard for them to kind of select things out in
Hmm.
comparison to other animals. As to keeping the magnet in, the only way to get the magnet out would be surgically, and that's a very hard area to reach surgically. So no, I have never seen anyone remove a magnet like in a precautionary way. I've seen people give a second magnet because they think like maybe it'll help, or maybe the first one's full, or they don't know that they already have a magnet. I do sometimes find them incidentally on postmortems. I find magnets on postmortems, and they tend to have stuff on them. Even if the cow doesn't have a big piece of wire, sometimes you just find little ferromagnetic pieces of little metal chips, little bits of soil, like, well, they look like soil, but little rock bits that were magnetic, and those kind of things kind of coating the magnet. Usually don't find like a clean magnet in an animal. There's usually something on it.
All right. I hope that answers the questions for that listener who was awfully curious about magnets, because again, they're not something that I guess we have a lot of conversations about, but all of that exists, and for a very needful reason, I might add. So the last question that I had from a listener, and in a way this might make you laugh just a little bit, but this listener's question was, okay, is it easier for vets to go to the doctor when they're sick, veterinarians, or are they tougher customers? Like, are you going to be a lot more open and willing to share your symptomology and help diagnose yourself versus what someone else might be when they go to the clinic?
You would have to ask my doctor, to be fair. It's not really it's not really legal for me to treat myself, so I can't just use our drugs. However, I have given myself stitches with no drugs because I just don't want to go in. And it was my non-dominant hand, so it wasn't like it was that hard. But in general, I find vets to be a little stubborn about going and getting treated on the whole. If you ask my colleagues in particular, I'm probably the one who's the most likely to go in and get help. If you ask my colleagues in particular, some of them are particularly stubborn about wanting to get help. I think we're kind of a tough group, and I think largely we know what'll kill us, and if it doesn't kill us, we think it's not worth complaining about. So I think that's generally the consensus amongst veterinarians. I know a lot of veterinarians who are bionic, especially my business partner, Dean. He's had a lot of new parts. I always say that his aggregate age because of his parts is younger than mine, even though he's quite a bit older than me because he has so many fresh parts. But we tend to go through a lot of parts. Most of us are on pretty good terms with an orthopedic surgeon because of either injuries or just, getting new rotator cuffs, getting that kind of stuff. But I find vets to be tough. I would say I think they're probably tough customers. I don't think that they're likely to admit that they're in pain. And I think too, like they're relative. I think we're kind of gluttons for punishment. One time I was ultrasounding cattle, and I knew my foot was broken because it got stomped on, but I thought, well, we know just enough to be dangerous. I knew it probably wasn't going to change anything because it was already in my boot and somewhat stable. So I figured I might as well finish the job. So I finished the job before I went in. So it just, I mean, I think it makes us worse in a lot of ways. I'll be honest. I think we're probably not everybody's favorite customer when it comes to that.
Okay, the boot thing makes sense though, because that foot's stable. If you take the boot off, it's just going to get
Right?
worse. So yeah, you're almost done,
That's what I
PG. You
thought.
might as well
And Addison and
Finish.
I looked at each other saying,
Yeah.
did she just say she gave herself her own stitches?
You actually had
That-
all three of us jaw
That
dropped.
is tough. Oh, man.
It was just a couple in my thumb. It wasn't really that cool.
Well, still.
We did have one. You can't see it actually. He did a great job, but one time I physically could not get to the ER. So my partner actually he gave me stitches because it was I fell, but it was such a bad blizzard. There was no way that I was going to be able to get in. So he stitched my face, and I you can't even see that. So um,
That's good
I mean,
work.
not that I'm
Uh,
advocating anyone give themselves stitches, but
yeah.
it was good work, and I'm very glad that I have that option because sometimes you just don't have an option with where we live and just being able to physically get somewhere. So I'm very grateful. I certainly get asked all the time by humans if I will do something for them or if I will check something or if I will do stuff, and that is illegal. I cannot actually even
Yeah.
offer human medical advice. That is in violation of my license. I actually had someone call in the middle of the night and get very, very mad at me because I wouldn't offer human medical advice. And unfortunately, I can't do that. It's not legal. I cannot comment on human health. I can tell you who to reach out to. I can give you some public health information, but I can only comment on those as a private citizen anecdotally. I cannot give human health advice. I'm really sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That makes total sense. I'm very glad to hear you're following that. And I just want to reiterate to people, don't call your veterinarian for those things. That's why you have a doctor. There's a difference in there. So yes.
Please,
Uh, Dr. Emily,
please.
I would tell you right now, we could do an entire show just of mishaps, adventures, and all the things that happen to large animal veterinarians. So if you want to start compiling that list one of these days, I think we just should do that for fun because I think the
Sure,
stories would be
sure.
outstanding. So, all right, thank you so much for joining us today, Emily. I hope that calving season wraps up smoothly. Y'all get some sleep and things go smoothly. Like less prolapses, the better.
Right? Have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. When we come back, we're going to recap what the weather looks like for later this week with our impending snow event coming in here starting on Thursday. We'll have more on that, and Bridgette's got some ag topics to hit as well when we come back. Hey, welcome back to Weather and Ag in Focus. We've got a pretty mild afternoon across the FM area with temperatures right around 50 degrees right now. Much different in the Northern Valley where temperatures still in the 20s and 30s. There's a cold front to the north, and that is sinking southward, and it'll make it through the area after dark tonight in the FM area, and with it will come a few rain and snow showers. Not looking for anything in the way of accumulation out of this round, but we'll see a day and a half break from Tuesday through Wednesday, and then as we head into Thursday, storm number 1 will start to affect our area. And it looks like a pretty good chance for 6 or more inches of snow out of this system as we head into Thursday. And then that should start to wind down on Friday. There's going to be a second system. Still some question marks on that, but the majority of that system looks to pass to our south into South Dakota, southern Minnesota, where they will get a pretty good shot at snow. So all the Dakotas and Minnesota going to get in on one of the two storm systems end of the weekend into the upcoming weekend. So, yeah, this will unfortunately play an impact in terms of travel with the big holiday weekend. A lot of people leaving town early, maybe Thursday, and my best advice is if you have to leave town, I would leave early Thursday morning because things will go downhill quickly during the day on Thursday and especially into Friday. So just kind of take that for what it's worth, and we'll update throughout the next 24 to 48 hours on how much snow. But again, quite a few of our models honing in on that 6+ inches across much of the valley. So something we'll keep an eye on. There is a chance this system could go south and really just sideswipe us, but I'm not seeing that right now. So worst case scenario, it looks like 6 to 10. Best case scenario would be only a couple inches. So we'll see how it pans out, but I'm leaning more towards some of that heavier wet snow Thursday into Friday.
Well, as we pass through the weather, we remember that this time of the year also brings us tax season because the weather warms up and I guess you could say your taxes get hotter to go along with it. Now, as farmers, you've got different deadlines, you've got extensions, there's been a ton of things going on in your world, and there have been some changes due to the One Big Beautiful Bill. Now, those changes went into effect January 1st. What might they be? Well, first of all, for a long time, it was a real pain for CPAs to have to tell you that you're not actually a farmer. What does that mean? Well, gains on selling or trading farm equipment under old rules was very difficult to qualify that income as farm income, but it's now been fixed. So the new definition recognizes gains from selling equipment, agritourism, and direct-to-customer marketing of farm products like beef, eggs, chickens, etc. Those all qualify as farm income. So that will help farmers qualify for more federal funds as program limits increase if producers have at least 75% of their income coming from the farm to qualify for the increased limit. Additionally, payment limits and entity structures were new changes. Congress corrected a long-standing inequity so that partnerships, LLCs, S-corps, and qualified joint ventures will not be treated more equitably. Payment limits will now be based on the number of owners rather than the entity type. So this change prevents farmers from being penalized for restructuring their operations due to tax or succession planning reasons. Because if you're trying to pass your farm or your agribusiness to the next generation and we're being penalized for doing that, made it a lot less advantageous. So that has been a change, particularly for LLCs and S-corps. Now, the changes that happened with crop insurance, the ARC and PLC updates have included automatic payment of the higher program benefit, and that eliminates the need for producers to pick between the programs to receive the benefit risks. It also anticipated that base acre expansions would increase payments in the future, and some farms with farmland not currently in the program. So a lot of those things have now been corrected, complements of what was going on in the One Big Beautiful Bill. Late last week in Washington, D.C., I think that was on Thursday, President Trump also talked about an additional skinny farm bill and what that might look like. I'm sure there'll be more details to come before too terribly long as we hear more about that. For those of you who are working with custom operations, and by that I mean custom harvesting, perhaps custom planting, South Dakota State University wants to hear from you. They are doing a custom farming rates survey, and it's available online. Now, the survey will include everything in the grain industry as well as livestock producers. There hasn't been a custom farming rate survey for several years. SDSU is excited to bring that back and analyze that information. Anything that you share with them will continue to be done in an anonymous manner. All information will be aggregated by region to help producers understand the average rates in their area. So this is an initiative to relaunch the survey that hasn't been done in a while. If you are curious about the survey and you want to participate, you are welcome to send me an email, ag@flagfamily.com, and I will share it with you. Again, that inbox powered by Superior Grain Equipment. And then the Women's Ag Leadership Conference will kick off tomorrow at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. That will be going on for the next couple of days. Many attendees call it an excellent event, very unique, brings people together from all over agriculture, particularly in Minnesota, and just the whole region. And it's an excellent way to be kicking off 2026 as the International Year of the Woman Farmer. Attendees are going to be welcomed by Minnesota FFA Association state officers, folks from Cannon Bell's Cheese, and so many more businesses and opportunities are going to be shared that day. Again, if you want to attend, you still can. It's tomorrow, and I think things kick off in the morning, probably early morning, 9, 10-ish. But if you are curious, just drop me that email, and I will do everything I can to get you the right links so you can attend. Hate for people to miss out on great educational opportunities that go on in ag all in our region. So that's just one more thing to put on the agenda for tomorrow.
A busy week indeed, no doubt.
It will be.
No doubt. And like I said, for the latest on the weather, just log on to our website, WDAYRadioNow.com. We'll be updating that again today and also into tomorrow. So that'll do for Weather and Ag in Focus. Want to thank you for joining us. Don't go anywhere. Jay Thomas Show is coming up next.